Welcome everybody to the Cloud Online Meetup. Today's topic is going to be automated open source software-based factories and pipelines for OpenStack, Docker, Jenkins, StackStorm, Consul, and more. Today's speakers are going to be Johnny Woolrich of Cambridge Satchel and formerly leading CI/CD at Marks & Spencer, and James Fryman of StackStorm and formerly GitHub. They will discuss requirements and approaches to build and maintain the sort of completely automated continuous integration and deployment needed to get software built, deployed, and operated faster and with higher quality. And in this online meetup, we will demonstrate, and they will demonstrate, a newly available CI/CD automation pipeline built upon StackStorm that ties together many systems from integration through test and deployment. And they will discuss real-world experiences and requirements experienced firsthand, such as at companies such as StackStorm, GitHub, Cambridge Satchel, as well as at global firms like Marks & Spencer. A few logistics front up. This session is going to be recorded, and the recording is going to be available on Monday next week, along with the slides. And in case you have any questions, feel free to ask by using the chat window at the left-hand side of the web panel. And with that said, let me hand over to you guys. The stage is yours.
Great. Thanks so much, Raphael. Johnny, thanks for joining us today.
No problem.
Everybody is doing very well. Just real quick, we're going to spend about 10 minutes talking about what StackStorm is and how it helps solve the problem that we're going to talk about today. And then in addition, just want to throw out there, if you have any questions, ask them. We want to make this as interactive as possible, so I don't want to have to wait till the very end. So get your questions in there. Let's have a really cool conversation about this. So with that, I'm going to just dive into StackStorm and talk about a little bit about what it is. When we started at StackStorm, we kind of had this problem statement of there's a ton of tools in any given organization, right? They're really great. Some of them, really are helping drive productivity. But the challenge becomes tying all of these different tools together to really cohesive pipelines. What ends up happening is all of these tools solve very small pieces of different portions of an organization. However, there's usually still a manual step that gets entered into there where I have a tool like my continuous integration that finishes, and then I have to go advance that code through to production, and there's a manual process associated with that. Or likewise, maybe I have all of these tools and I've written some custom scripts to get together a continuous pipeline. But over time, those tools become, the glue code becomes more difficult to maintain than not. And so the automation that initially ended up helping you ends up actually causing problems down the road. Johnny, I'd love to hear about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so hello everybody. So I was leading a big £100 million software engineering project at Marks & Spencer to re-platform. And part of my role was to try and make software engineering as slick as possible, basically. And we ended up using Ansible, Splunk, Logstash, Jenkins, Git, Jira, AppDynamics, AWS. And that was just in some of our kind of continuous integration environments. And we had multiple teams trying to do similar things with the same tools. And we literally spent a couple of years trying to build our own glue to make that work. Or alternatively, we had big suppliers with big release management tools who were coming to us saying, well, you need to get rid of all that, and you should use our tool instead. So this glue concept, because a lot of us are using these tools already, it's how do you then control the tools and make them talk to each other?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What would you say your biggest challenge was in building some of this?
So we spent just a lot of time figuring out the order in which a particular tool would have to pass off to another tool, and what would we do with the logs that came out of a server? Would we store them in a particular log stash, and how would that connect with Nagios? And it was really getting that glue working. So I met with StackStorm first when I was at the DevOps Enterprise Summit in the autumn, and the diagram that showed all of these tools kind of connected together immediately drew me to them to say, well, actually, this is a problem that I'm seeing. So what can you do about it? And hence why I've since had quite a lot of conversations with StackStorm, because it's very interesting.
Right on, absolutely. And I think that's important to mention is because what ends up happening is you end up having to concern yourself with a lot of extra things around building this glue code, like logging, like auditing, like access control. All of these things, aren't considerations when you're building that first connector between, say, Jenkins and Jira and GitHub. But once you start to actually think about how do I make this maintainable, it becomes very difficult very quickly. And this is where StackStorm comes in. So we've been often referred to as the if this, then that for operations. What StackStorm does is integrates with different tools and acts as that intermediary glue layer, the orchestration layer. We will accept and look at events that happen from different tools, fire off triggers, and match those to different rule sets that we can then use to orchestrate large, complex workflows. So that's what we're going to talk about today, how all of those pieces tie together, and specifically within the continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline. However, we're much more than that, and I want to be very clear that this is just one of many use cases that StackStorm wants to be able to fill in an organization, is how can we help you with things like getting good monitoring across all of the tools that may not have native monitoring integration? Or how do I have issue tracking into tools that haven't even begun to think about issue tracking? Likewise with log analysis, security, provisioning, all of these things. And this is pretty much how it goes. So from an event gets fired, let's say from our monitoring system, that event ends up going into StackStorm. StackStorm confirms and receives that event, and then sends out some notification. This is an example workflow. And workflows can be either through ChatOps. ChatOps is a huge kind of component that we're baking into our application, bringing in the context of the work that you're already doing into the context of the conversations you're already having. So being able to execute and have shared command line in the conversations in your chat rooms. Likewise, it could also go to log analysis or kick off other events with other tools. Once that's done, StackStorm may make decisions on, hey, can I fix this? And actually call out to different other tools such as Puppet, Ansible, Chef, or connect to my cloud to do provisioning, to do remediation, to build pipelines, whatever the specific workflows that make sense and you build into your own organization. And then we can also confirm and make sure that things look good. The key here, though, is that StackStorm is the intermediary into all of these things and acts as the glue between all of the different events, handling, again, audit, logging, security, role-based access control, and more. Here I've got a quick little architecture diagram for those who like pretty pictures. This is my favorite, is talking about how these things actually work. And why this is important is because we have built StackStorm from the ground up to be enterprise ready. And that means preparing for scale from day one. And often that's an overlooked piece in tools like this, where it works really great for the 1 to 10 company, but once I get to, okay, I have 1,000 servers or 10,000 servers or even 100,000 servers and tens of thousands of users, which is very common in enterprises, the tools aren't ready. However, with our architecture, we've already created a modular architecture that can be split up into different components. So in this example, we have step 1, which drops into our sensors. Sensors can be either an active sensor or a passive sensor, so a push or pull event. Those all get dropped onto our message queue, which are managed by StackStorm workers. So those things will go and match against rules. Then the workers will go off and execute other workflows as necessary, all the while making sure that auditing and logging is taken care of. Now, if you notice, we also have I have a call out to Mistral. We have 2 workflow engines that we'll go through today. One is Action Chain, which is our own internal linear workflow engine, very simple, top to bottom, very much like a bash script. And then we also have Mistral, which is an OpenStack project, which we contribute very heavily to. The Mistral workflow engine allows us to do very complex things, complex logic, parallel execution, retries. So we have kind of a good flavor of, if you need to get started, we have tools to help you get going very quickly. And then once you get to really complex use cases and you start to really see and build upon the power of StackStorm, we have a workflow engine that will handle that as well. And this is today kind of apropos for what we're talking about, is why even do continuous integration and continuous delivery? And what's key here is we talk around the industry, and we see that a lot of people are already doing continuous integration, and this is good. Some 40% of folks in different organizations are using homegrown tools. The other 70% are usually using something, 60% are usually using something like Jenkins or Travis CI or some other continuous integration tool. However, the continuous deployment portion is usually overlooked. There's still that manual process or some other process that actually takes to promote code to production. It's usually unwieldy and difficult to get through. So creating the ability to do multiple deployments in a given, hour is a method that we hear Web 2.0 companies talking about, but enterprises are still on the old kind of delivery pipeline where we do a release once a month or once a quarter or even sometimes once a year. Johnny, I know we were talking a little bit about your own experiences with continuous integration and continuous deployment. I'd love to hear maybe some of your own insight.
Yeah, I think it's obviously people are using Jenkins for continuous integration and all these tools that you mentioned before, but there really isn't a reason for anyone not to use them for particular purposes within an enterprise. What we found at Marks and Spencer is we had maybe 1,200 applications that the team over the years had contributed to and was supporting, but the new ones that were more maybe Web 2.0. There's no reason why we couldn't start doing those in the right way, and that's essentially what we did. So it's about kind of choosing the paces of your apps and making sure that you're choosing to do DevOps where it makes sense and where you can get the best bang for your buck.
Absolutely. All right, so with that, I'm going to actually jump into the demo. We've kind of talked about a very high level here about what StackStorm is, but it's always super helpful to actually see the thing in action and what to do and start putting real concrete examples around how StackStorm can actually operate. So I'm going to switch over here to a second, and I'm going to start talking about the actual demo. So what today's demo is going to do is we're going to show an actual continuous deployment from code commit all the way to a production environment. Today I'm going to be using an example application called SeatShare. This is a real live application at myseatshare.com. This is a Ruby on Rails application with a Postgres backend. Likewise, we're also going to be using Jenkins as our build server, just because this is a very commonly used application. And I also want to talk a little bit about the other tools that exist in this architecture. We've chosen a bunch of different tools along the entire stack to show how StackStorm can integrate with tools that we'll call old school, and maybe that's a bad example, but tools that don't have APIs, maybe have to be integrated or manipulated through the command line only. Tools like Puppet or HA Proxy. And then there's kind of your newer tools which have APIs already baked into them that we can integrate with, things like GitHub or Jenkins or Console. So it's really what we want to illustrate is that once you have a tool that you're comfortable with from maybe a knowledge perspective or just experience, you no longer have to let go of that tool because it can't fit 100% of your needs. You can now take advantage of what makes sense for you and integrate it into StackStorm and start creating more complex pipelines. So you get to get more life out of your existing tools. And on top of that, you can start to integrate new tools into your environment without really disrupting existing users' workflows. The abstraction between a workflow and an action allows you to create common interfaces for users that you can then on the back end change all you want, and the user behavior still stays the same. We think that's super powerful. And likewise, I just want to show the demonstration of the infrastructure that is built up here. This is certainly a very small infrastructure relatively to many deployments, but it is a demo, so just for speed purposes, we kept it kind of small and lean. But we have our StackStorm server, which is an on-prem solution today. So you would install a StackStorm server into your organization. Then we have our Jenkins server, which is a separate box altogether. We have an infrastructure box, and that infrastructure box is going to handle a couple roles for us. Specifically, it's going to handle the packaging portion of our workflow, where after I've committed code and it's gone through continuous integration, it gets packaged up and put into an apt package repository for deployment. And then likewise, the pattern that we're going to be using for continuous integration and continuous delivery today is what's called the canary pattern. And the canary pattern is very much like the idiom, the canary in the coal mine, where we're only deployed to a subset of servers that we've designated as canary servers to do live testing or partial testing, making sure that, hey, is the code responding to how I want it to on a percentage of traffic or a percentage of nodes or percentage of users, as opposed to deploying in sort of a flag day response where it's either all or nothing and it works or it doesn't. So once you have this pipeline, you can get assurance through your continuous integration platform that things are looking good through your tests. And then you can actually get validation of that in production with the canary pattern. There are other continuous delivery patterns such as blue, green, and whatnot. And this easily can be modeled as well. So yeah, I don't want to say that canary is the only way, but this is just the one we chose for this demonstration. All right. So I'm going to come back to my application. And I actually want to make a change. The application is doing fantastic. We're about to start to offer a premium service to our users. And so now I want to change it from Seat Share to Seat Share Deluxe. So I'm actually going to make that change into this top header right here and commit that to code. So I'm going to come in here, check out a new branch, new name, and I'm going to edit the header itself. App views public index. And on here, I'm going to share what is Seat Share, and I'm going to say what is Seat Share Deluxe. I'm going to save that, commit. And I'll push this up to GitHub. So this has gone to GitHub now, and GitHub has webhooks associated with repositories. So as a push event comes in, GitHub will emit hooks out, and we are now capturing that hook in order to do something with StackStorm. So I'm now going to look over into my chat console, because we're big onto chat ops, and I can see that StackStorm has sent me a message. Hey, I have saw that a new branch was pushed, and I'm going to now start a CI build. Now, this is really cool and important because with the chat ops, I've now brought in the context of what is changing with the tools into the context of the conversation. So now I can even click on these links, and I can take a look at, what is the status of what changed here, and look at, here's my change. So now it's very easy to kind of toggle back and forth between understanding what is happening in line with the conversations that I'm already having. Likewise, let's take a quick look at the rule that has come up and is being actually triggered here. So if I take a look at the incoming rule from GitHub, we have 3 components here. We have our trigger, and triggers are the sensors that we have internal to our system. In this case, we're using a webhook sensor. We come with several built-in sensors, a polling sensor, which will go out and actively poll for information. We have our webhook sensor, which is a passive sensor, and a couple other internal ones. Likewise, these are very easy to build on your own. All right, am I back? Oh my goodness, hotel Wi-Fi, how awesome is that? Johnny, are you still with us?
I am indeed, yeah. You're back.
Where did I get lost? Yeah.
I got lost. I dropped off and I'm back again. It's Raphael here. So,
oh goodness, what even happened?
Yeah.
So let me just step back a little bit and make sure we can catch up here real quick. So we made a change to seatshare.com, and we pushed this up to our repository. So we should see it up there. I don't know if we got that far. I can come over here to our chat ops, and I can see that the chat ops pushed events to GitHub and started a CI build. As a matter of fact, it failed. So I'm going to actually take a look at that real quick and find out what failed. And again, I can click on this, open it up, and come down over here and say, I had a test failure. Now this is really cool because what it does is it brings in into chat ops, why this is important, is it brings in a feedback loop very quickly to developers, so they're able to get feedback pretty quickly, and shared feedback, so other folks who are working on maybe the same feature or whatnot can also see that and maybe provide input to, hey, this test failed because X or it failed because Y. And that's the power of chat ops. So I'm going to actually edit this code real quick, and I'm going to fix my test, and then we'll come back to this. So I'm going to go edit my test, controllers, and I'll come over here and I say, yep, I in fact changed the name from what is seat share, and I actually need to add my deluxe tag here. And I'm going to push this new fix up to GitHub. So we should be able to look over here into our chat room and see that a new change has been pushed, and it's going to go ahead and kick off my CI build once again. We should see that here in just a moment. There it goes. Now then, while that's going once again, I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to talk about workflows. So we talked really briefly about what a rule is. A rule is a set of triggers that are usually sensors, active or passive, that are matched with criteria. And in this case, the webhook that comes in from GitHub is automatically parsed and converted into an object that we can then reference in code. So the trigger has a header specifically that we can match to a push event. And we can match many items at any given time. So I can do and checks against multiple things. And I have many different types of ways I can compare. I can do mathematical operations, less than, equal than, greater than. I can do regular expression matching. I can do partial expression matchings. Very complex ways we can do criteria matching. And then once a criteria is matched within a given rule, an action is kicked off. And an action can be either a single action, go do this one thing, or it can be a series of actions which compose into a workflow. And that's what we're going to talk about next. And I can take in any of the data that came in from my webhook and translate those and pass those on to my actual action or workflow. So in this case, I'm passing on the name of the project, what branch it is, who pushed it, the commit details, and maybe where I can go find additional information about it. So coming over here, the workflow that gets kicked off may look like this. This is actually the deployment workflow, which we actually should see happening right now. So I come over to my chat ops. We successfully kicked off CI. That CI pass now, test passed, and now we're beginning an actual packaging and deployment of this code to production. And that's following this workflow that we see right here. This is an action chain workflow. Again, very linear, top to bottom, but you can describe the name of the action that you want to happen in abstract terms, go and get the version of canary code that's deployed, and then reference the action, the thing that I want to have happen, in my code as well. So if I needed to change out how I would go retrieve this information, I can change the action itself, but the workflow and the construct of the workflow stays intact. So I can very quickly and easily change out components if necessary. And this is usually a very challenging thing to do, where interchanging components becomes very difficult. As you write this glue code, things become very sticky and monolithic and hard to change. And as a result, it becomes difficult to pivot if you need to introduce new tools or you need to change how you're doing something. Because now the glue code that is dependent and making your operations work now is inflexible to allow you to do these things. Johnny, I'd love to get your thoughts on maybe some pitfalls that you've run into with the inflexibility of some of these scripts.
Well, yeah, in an enterprise, if you've got lots of different tools, obviously different teams have different choices of different tools as well. I mean, it's very difficult to say to one team, you have to use Jenkins. You know, Team City might be used by a .NET team or something. The trick becomes kind of maintaining all of this, all these hooks and whatever. So we actually had a team that was responsible for keeping some of the kind of the flow going between these kind of what I call the code factories across maybe 400 developers and my own personal team of about 50. And it was almost a full-time job, I guess, to your point. You know, what was the problem with this? If you hand roll all of these connections, it's almost a full-time job to keep them running.
Yep, absolutely. And that's just, that's detracting from actually business delivery, right? And that's the goal of these automations is how do we get things to market faster and easier and so that I can get home and spend time with my family as opposed to really spending time on how do I build these automations so I can ship this thing. Big proponent of automation, just how do we do it smarter? How do we do it smarter? That's the key here. So this workflow, very simple, top to bottom, goes through and does things like post messages to Slack, interacts with console to get information from the key value store, actually makes and calls to the servers themselves to go do updates, and push out code to production. What's key here is these different tools, again, this is a API call, this is a command line tool, and we have different ways to interact with these. So actions can be integrate with your existing scripts. So if you already have an existing library, that would be kind of a waste to throw away and say, okay, now you have to do it the StackStorm way, which is kind of analogous to Johnny's point there a moment. Not every developer, not every team works the exact same way. So with StackStorm, you can start to model the abstract workflows that make sense to your organization, but let departments and teams figure out what makes best for them to deliver. All right. So I'm actually going to come back over here to my chat ops here, and I should see, hey, I'm successfully deployed. And now let's go back to my website, and I'm going to refresh it. Now this might actually take a second here because we're using HA proxy, which uses least connections, and since we're in a load testing environment, there's not really many connections coming in here. So let's just refresh a few times until we can get HA proxy to fake out that we've actually deployed some new code here. Come on, roll a 20. Boy, this is awesome. There we go, congratulations. So notice there it actually took some time there, which is exactly the behavior that we want to happen with our canary. We don't want 100% of our traffic to hit the canary node. We want to be able to use some analytics there. So maybe if I have some sort of application monitoring tools, or I'm baking my own, sending triggers to my own time series database, I'd like to be able to use some amount of science to determine, has my traffic profile changed at all? Does my application compile time take longer? What does success look like? And being able to deploy to a subset of servers allows you to gather some information before really putting your business at risk. So everything looks really good, and I'm actually going to advance this to production. In this example, I'm going to trigger this manually using the command line on StackStorm, but it could be very just as easily that you maybe create a workflow rule that checks your application performance monitoring and says after 30 minutes or so, if everything looks good, just go ahead and roll that code manually to production. Or maybe you want to integrate it with some existing tools that you use for maybe change control, where somebody in your management chain needs to approve that. So you integrate it with a tool like Garrett or Jira that has actual acceptance criteria that you can then have StackStorm query to determine, has this been approved, and then go ahead and take an action as a result of it. The last thing that's really important here is the workflow associated with the deployment itself. And why this is really interesting to me is by building these workflows, you're able to introduce safety into how things run in your organization. So in this case, a canary deploy, new code can be pushed to a canary at any time. It doesn't even matter. It could be good code, it could be bad code. Any code can go to a canary. However, in order for code to be deployed to production, it has to advance through the canary pipeline, which means when I issue a deploy command, what it's going to go do is determine what version of code is deployed to the canary, and then use that as its information to deploy to production. That's a very simple example of writing some guardrails around it. But by making workflows very easy and very approachable to developers, you get to encourage good behaviors within your development or your operational teams. Here's the good behavior I want to encourage. Here's the tools to execute these things very fast. 90 to 95% of the things that are going to happen are going to be handled by StackStorm, and all you need to do is consume it. And that's the real power. You get to model how things work as code, which is also really important. Notice that everything here that you see is a very simple YAML file. So anybody can write this YAML to start to model infrastructure or pipelines. And now that that's code, you can even have audit trails around changes. Git history just acts as almost a log, if you will, of how your organization changes over time. How did you change workflows? How were they defined? How did they work for you at one point? The power of infrastructure as code is immense. And really want to drive this home is these simple YAML files can consume all of the actions that we've built or the community has built to build really cool and complex pipelines. Likewise, with the separation of duties here, if I had a subject matter expert, those folks can be busy writing what we call our action libraries, right, our actions. And then that knowledge that gets captured in an action is now available to all of the users of StackStorm. They can now take advantage of that. Really good examples that I've had in the past is, I'm not a MySQL guy, but in a previous job at GitHub, we had a guy who was really great at MySQL. And he was able to capture in some of his action library into ChatOps how to do very common MySQL commands, like take a backup of this database and restore it, or do a failover to multiple cluster nodes. Now, these are things that I could probably figure out and do on my own, but I'd have probably sweat bullets a little bit. But now that it's been baked into an action, I now have assurance that those things have been worked and tested, and now I can just consume those very easily. So again, kind of coming back to this, if this, then that for infrastructure. Have your subject matter experts write actions, and then have everybody consume them and write workflows. So final bit here, I'm going to come over here to my server, and I'm going to deploy this new code. And I'm going to use the command line here, which we have, st2 run. So if you are really a lover of command line, we have the st2 command, which is available, which allows you to look at all the different sensors that are in our system, the different triggers, all the defined rules and actions. We have other really great documents on getting started on our website, on stackstorm.com/community, if you want to learn more about how to dig into the command line. So I'm just going to run this command real quick. Oh, and notice here I've also actually got a failure, which is really good. I have defined some amount of schema that's required in order to deploy something. And so now I can do validation, input validation at the forefront before it even enters into workflow. So making sure you get the good data right the first time is super important. Oh, not StackStorm, I'm sorry, SeatShare. So now I should be able to come over here to my console and see, hey, there goes my deploy again. And in just a few minutes, we should see that it successfully gets deployed to production. So Johnny, you've seen all of this, and I know we've been talking for a long time, but I'd love to hear about, how do you see StackStorm helping you out in your day-to-day, and what things have you already played with?
Yeah, thanks, James. So I left Marks & Spencer recently to join Cambridge Satchel, and it's an interesting transition because Cambridge Satchel is pretty much a startup. It's only been around 5 years. And I joined as CTO when there wasn't really a technology team at all. So with a clean sheet of paper, it's like, okay, what do I do here then? And actually the first thing I thought about what I actually need and what I was used to at Marks & Spencer is this kind of code factory. So before we even started building any software, it's like, let's build this connected set of apps where we can deploy code easily, we can get feedback quickly, we can build our CI environment. And to me, that's a really interesting pattern that I think will be more and more something that all development teams will be asking. Not just turning up to code and then a few months later thinking, oh, we better start doing some DevOps type processes and culture, like having that from the very beginning. And all the tools that I mentioned before, they're the tools that I'm used to, and I don't really want to go out there and buy a really expensive release management tool or anything like that forces me to change the way I want my teams to work. The problem out there really is how do you just get these tools to connect to each other? And it's really interesting. I'm seeing more and more that I need specific DevOps skills in the team. I know it's a bit unfashionable. It's kind of some people call it an anti-pattern to us or DevOps specific people. But things are starting to get quite complicated. And my expensive engineers, they're innovating on the product and not necessarily want to be scripting the same things over and over again all day. So to have a code factory that they use that enables them to work fast and have a standard way of doing their work, for me it's just amazing. And it's been really interesting starting from a clean sheet and having that in place.
Yeah, that's real powerful. One of the things that I think also is kind of interesting that I'm excited with Stackstorm about is this idea of operational patterns. I know you're saying that, hey, these things are getting quite complex, and up to this point, it's very hard to share. Like, how do you actually build this canary pipeline? Like, oh, this is fantastic, and a lot of companies have this stuff internally and say, like, I want to do this. How do I do this? And yet, the best that you may be able to do is say, look, here's kind of how I did it, and you end up talking about the theory and the ideas around it, but you actually can't go and implement something. But with Stackstorm, kind of taking in advantage infrastructure as code, we're building a very strong community around writing an action library. Now we can start to collaborate as an industry together, right? Where this canary pattern or a pipeline that may work for me, I can now actually share with you. You can download these patterns, apply them to your own Stackstorm server, and see what works for you. Maybe it gets you 80% there or 90% there. That's a far cry better than 0% there, or even the 5% of ideation that you may be able to get out of it. Yeah. Now, why I bring that up though is go ahead.
The other thing I'd say is the modern world and the way that all the DevOps tools are progressing. There's a new one every day. So
right.
I'm not saying in terms of Stackstorm, but in terms of Slack appeared a couple of years ago, and suddenly what am I doing with Skype? What am I doing with ChatOps? So it's nice to know that actually you can plug and play your tools, and that was what I was always trying to do at Marks and Spencer. But at the time, we kind of had to make our own kind of glue between everything. That it just took us so much time. But we still had the same things happening. But again, we couldn't really share it with other teams that easily because it was in a way that's kind of abstracted from being able to share. But to have that confidence as a CTO building up this kind of factory is that, well, if there's some new technology that's better at deploying code in a particular way, or if Amazon goes away and we want to go to Google, then we just change that part of the factory, which gives me a lot of confidence.
Absolutely, I like it. I jokingly like to say that I'm an internet plumber of sorts, right?
Yeah.
Infrastructure is exactly that, right? Building that plumbing for the internet. But it hasn't been a good analogy up to this point because plumbers have fixtures and pipes and things that they can swap out and interchange depending on flow and need and whatnot. This really brings that analogy home where now I've got, I can actually have a factory of sorts, and that factory can be abstracted to talk about exactly the new tool or a different cloud or an and. Maybe you want to try a new tool just to see if it could be better, and you don't want to go all in on it, right? Experimenting becomes super easy to do. Very awesome. And this code is all available online. We have on GitHub, we have the Stackstorm Showcase at github.com. where we store all of our different demos that we have here. And this is the CI/CD Canary pipeline. So if you want to download this, you can actually spin this up locally today, install it, give it a shot, see what works for you, and maybe even adapt it and grow with it. And this is really cool, right? Go grab this, go download this, get it running, play with it, and even maybe commit a pull request. And that's just a fantastic thought. I would love to take a pull request on an infrastructure pattern. And I think we're there. So with that, that brings us to the end of today's presentation and demo. I'd like to take a moment and see if there are any questions from our folks who have been listening, and which I appreciate you joining today.
Thank you very much, guys, for your presentation and for the demo. It seems there are no questions currently from the audience, but let's wait a couple of minutes. Maybe people will start asking questions right now.
Sure. I hope that just means that we did a good job explaining it.
You definitely guys did. You definitely did.
Awesome. Well, while I'm waiting for some feedback, we can talk a little bit about what's coming, right? I did allude at the very beginning that StackStorm is more than just a continuous integration and continuous delivery platform. We are working to become the orchestration platform for all the things that you do. So in next month's meetup, which will be on the 4th of March, is that correct, Raphael?
The 5th of March, and I will share the URL shortly, yes.
Excellent, thank you. On the 5th of March, we will be meeting again to talk about how StackStorm can help with cloud auto-scaling. So pick a cloud, any cloud, call it Rackspace, Amazon, DigitalOcean, or your own internal kind of OpenStack cloud, and then use that to do automatic provisioning based on some events. I had failures within my systems, or I have high load. Well, let's actually help out, provide some more additional information. So we should see a blog post coming out within the next few weeks about that pattern, and we'll have our online meetup on the 5th of March to talk about that some more.
All right, so the first questions are popping in.
Awesome.
Let me just check. Can we do continuous deployment with Puppet 2?
Yes. As a matter of fact, we have a Puppet integration. So if you have, for example, want to manage how packages are installed, so in this pattern we're using just apps to go install those packages, but I can certainly see and appreciate how maybe you want to enforce a state with Puppet. We have a hook to go ahead and execute commands with Puppet. We also have a chef pack that has come out, and we are working on an Ansible and a salt pack, which should be coming up in the subsequent weeks. The goal here is to integrate with these tools, right? There's an already existing DevOps library that exists out there, to Johnny's point earlier, and we want to be able to integrate with those things. So it's an and approach. If you have tools already that do and make sense for your organization, we want to integrate with those. If you don't, we can also take the place of those and help out there too. It's a good question. Thank you.
So the next question, why is it easier with SaltStorm?
Why is it easier with StackStorm?
Yeah.
Why is it easier with StackStorm? Well, I think what's easier with StackStorm is, again, it allows you to distribute how work is done. So, I'm an operations guy, and one of the trends that I've seen over the years is that as operations personnel, we tend to be lone wolves of sort, right? We're going to go off and we're going to solve this problem. Maybe I'll collaborate a little bit with my team on the idea, but when it comes to actually writing the code, I kind of have to go off into a corner because we don't have good ways to share and collaborate. Well, StackStorm helps me with that. I'm able to spread how work gets done. So recently we built an autoscale. We built this autoscale pattern that we're going to be demoing at the next meetup. We actually distributed the load quite efficiently, where we are able to give the subject matter experts who built new integrations with, we built a New Relic integration, we built a Chef integration, we built a Rackspace integration, and a couple other things too. And we were able to go to people who were domain experts in that thing and have them write the action library. Now, meanwhile, there was another member of the team who was actually architecting the pipeline itself. And that person didn't have to think about implementation details so much. They were able to think about what does it take to get from A to Z, to get how do I respond to events? What kinds of things do I need to be thinking about? And that workflow was able to be developed outside of the action library. So again, we as technologists like to have great conversations about patterns, and then we get into the weeds with implementation details. Well, this tool won't do this, or this tool won't do that. Well, StackStorm kind of takes that argument away, or makes it moot to a point, where now I can take all of the tools and figure out what piece of it works the best and integrate it into a workflow, and leverage a true architecture fashion, where I'm able to sit down and think about, in an abstract term, what do I actually want to have happen? And maybe I don't even need to be a domain expert in the tools that are underneath it. I can just write, here is what a good practice looks like, model that, and then leverage and work with my team to build that action library. So I think it becomes, working better together is really the key. You're able to leverage and distribute your workload a little bit better. Johnny, I'd love to maybe hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I was trying to do at Marks & Spencer was log absolutely everything that we did. So you might be spinning up a new cloud environment. You might do some testing, and then a week down the line, you're sort of thinking, what happened there? So we did a lot of work trying to integrate Logstash, but what we seemed to lose along the way was actually what commands in our pipeline did we run. And the thing I like about StackStorm is that gets logged. You didn't really show that, James, but you can go back to a command and say what actually happened. Yeah, what was the output of that particular command that I did, just now or last week? And for me, that's kind of an important kind of audit role, particularly in the big enterprise, just to know that you have that available, so you can go back to it and say, well, yeah, we did actually do that command at that point on that day.
Absolutely. So you're right. I didn't talk about that, but I'll just pull it up here just really quickly. StackStorm does contain an entire list and audit history of what commands got executed and in what workflows. So if you have a workflow that's composed of other commands, you can go look at that workflow as an aggregate and see what the success or failure of each of the individual commands in a workflow are, or what was the success of a specific command. So I can sp2, execution, git, and I can now look at the output of that. So I can see, hey, here's the command that ran, here's the output of that command, here's the success, here's where it ran. All of these things are now available to me, and in a format that I can then use in other places. Straight up JSON that I can then integrate with other tools if necessary. We have a web UI that's going to be coming out very soon. If you're interested in trying it out, we do have a friends and family program. You can email us at support@stackstorm.com. Send us your GitHub username, and we'll be happy to provide access to it, which is how we're going to be using for audit purposes. We have a really great UI that's under development that graphically shows that exact audit trail that Johnny just mentioned.
Guys, the next question is, how do you integrate monitoring systems like Nagios with StackStorm?
Good question. So we do already have a Nagios integration, and Nagios is infamous for being persnickety. Let's say that. So what we actually do is we created a event handler for Nagios that then sends events to StackStorm via a specific sensor that we built. So in some cases, you're going to have tools that aren't so easy to integrate with, like Nagios. But if you can get it to emit an event of somehow or execute arbitrary script of some sort, you can use that information that gets passed on to send it to StackStorm, be it through a command that you call directly with the sp2 command, or via a webhook or other sensor that you may build. If you want to check out the Nagios sensor in particular, it's available on our on GitHub, or actually check out it on our website, stackstorm.com/community. There are links there to all of our available community packs, as well as information on how to get started there too. So certainly if you want to try that out, we'd love to get some more feedback on the Nagios integration in particular.
One more question. So you are saying, is asking Tom, that instead of manually kicking off Puppet script, you kick off a Puppet script via StackStorm. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, so that's exactly it, right? So, Puppet and other configuration management tools of late have been trying to bridge this gap between configuration management and orchestration. To be frank, like the tools of configuration management really aren't built for orchestration. And so some of the patterns like, hey, I need to install this package, in order to get it installed, you end up having to run Puppet several times, and that may or may not make sense for your organization. Some places need a lot of speed, and some of these configuration management tools are a little heavy. They take some time to converge. But that trade-off for safety is also necessary as well in some organizations that need to move a little bit slower to assert that security. So in this case, maybe we would say, hey, I just want to kick off a Puppet run to force convergence faster than the default time of the 30 minutes that necessarily kicks off, right? If by deploying I want to kick off Puppet, and Puppet is responsible for installing my system, I'm just going to trigger that event to occur on the system and let Puppet handle convergence of that node. So basically we're playing friendly with Puppet it's already integrated into your system. We're just triggering it ad hoc, more or less, basically like a puppet tick command.